This is CBC Vancouver News.
Could it be the finale in the Surrey policing saga?
I accept the decision and we are moving forward.
The mayor publicly drops her fight to keep the RCMP with support from some and calls for her resignation from others.
Mayor Locke was correct in her fight.
Plus, he spent a grand total of 2 days running for the BC United ahead of the fall election. Why the opposition has suddenly turfed their candidate for Surrey North. Also, beware of deer.
I know they can be quite threatening. I got chased by a deer a whole plot.
A dog is killed in a deer attack in the Okanagan, prompting an unusual warning from conservation officers. Hello, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. It seems the Surrey policing saga is finally over. After a drawn-out fight with the province and repeatedly pushing back against a municipal force, the city's mayor begrudgingly admits it is time to transition away from the RCMP. But it's not without continued controversy and even calls for her resignation. She's dug in her heels at every turn to try to keep the RCMP, but now Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke is publicly backing down her fight in the wake of a failed court challenge.
While I'm disappointed by the outcome of the judicial review, I accept the decision.
Last month, a BC Supreme Court judge sided with the province, ordering the city to transition to a municipal police force. Now, resignation in her voice, Locke has put questions of an appeal to rest.
And we are moving forward with what the city needs to do to ensure that our residents are prioritized with the provincially legislated police transition.
But some are calling for her resignation. In the social media post, the Safe Surrey Coalition, led by former Surrey Mayor Doug McCallum, calls on Locke to step down for, quote, wasting millions of dollars of taxpayer money. Yet other leaders in the community are standing by her.
Mayor Locke was correct in her fight to ensure that we kept the Surrey RCMP. There was no evidence that we needed a new police force.
And while all of the back and forth took center stage, behind the scenes, new hiring has quietly been ramping up.
There definitely has been an uptick in interest.
With the political dust settled, the Surrey Police Service says there's been a surge of interest in joining the force. At one point, the city was refusing to pay the salaries of new municipal officers, preventing them from growing their ranks. But fast forward to today, and the force has assembled a staff of 367 officers and 60 civilians.
And we hope that momentum is regained and that we will be able to expedite what is now this long overdue policing transition.
The Surrey Police Service will officially become the police of jurisdiction on November 29th. Another shakeup in BC politics ahead of the fall election, with a candidate getting turfed after only 48 hours. BC United has suddenly dropped its newly announced candidate for Surrey North over comments made about the war in Gaza and LGBTQ+ people. In a statement, opposition leader Kevin Falcon says he recruited Assad Gondal to fulfill his commitment to make BC United a party of diversity. He says Gondal has since shared opinions that are inconsistent with the party's views on the situation in Gaza and its support for BC's LGBTQ+ community. Falcon says he asked Gondal if he was willing to accept the party's position on those issues, but says Gondal told him he could not change his values and principles. Falcon then terminated his candidacy. To Nanaimo now, where police say several pro-Palestinian protesters entered a restricted area at Vancouver Island University today. Officers say the group was told to leave by campus security because they were trespassing. The demonstrators have been asking the university to disclose all investments and to use its influence to help end the war in Gaza. Vancouver City Council is considering adding another staff member to Mayor Ken Sim's office. And while the position wouldn't amount to new spending, it would push Sim's office budget higher than his predecessors. As Chad Paulson explains, that's something that he promised he wouldn't do when he ran for office.
Vancouver's Mayor Ken Sim is set to get a new office staff member from the city's civil service with $80,000 in already approved funding. The change, though, is contrary to Sim's promise to run a tight, efficient office. 2 years ago, Sim was campaigning to defeat then-Mayor Kennedy Stewart. He was critical of spending for 2 chiefs of staff, saying it was a waste of money.
And every single president of the United States and every single prime minister of Canada have gotten by with one chief of staff, and then we have the city of Vancouver that needs 2 chiefs of staff under the current mayor. That's an issue.
As mayor, Sim only has 1 chief of staff, but his office budget has not shrunk, it's increased. In Kennedy Stewart's last full year as mayor, his office budget was $1.11 million. In Ken Sim's first full year as mayor, that number increased to $1.27 million. Currently, it's ballooned to $1.47 million, with the potential to increase another $80,000. Kennedy Stewart won't wade into his replacement spending decisions, but councillors outside of Sim's own party on council are expressing concern over the proposed change of course.
I have a lot of concerns about this continued increase in the mayor's office budget.
Why are we making this shift to now reallocating civil servants to the mayor's office?
Councillors were asked to approve this immediately, but with Mayor Ken Sim away on other city business, the vote's been pushed back 2 weeks. Opposition councillors do want their questions answered. How is the mayor spending his budget, and on what? In a statement through his office, Mayor Ken Sim says the funds are simply being reallocated to where they are needed most. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
A year-plus long investigation of a gang, originally from Montreal, has led to the arrest of 5 men in Vancouver. The gang, known as Zone 43, started operating here a few years ago. Last month, investigators uncovered 7 kilograms of fentanyl, 11 kilos of cocaine, 2 kilos of methamphetamine, and 2 kilos of cutting agents. They also seized 2 handguns and more than $150,000 in cash.
Our staff are committed to combating organized crime groups operating in our community, especially those from other jurisdictions that seek to establish operations in Vancouver and profit from the sale of toxic drugs.
The 5 men arrested have since been released and will be facing a slew of drug and criminal charges once police finish their investigation. New Westminster is following in Burnaby's footsteps by imposing new renter protections. It comes on the heels of provincial legislation aimed at increasing housing density around transit hubs. As John Hernandez reports, housing advocates say more protections are needed as the risks of rent evictions ramp up.
So I would encourage council to think about a creative, innovative policy, and let's push back.
One by one, local tenants took center stage at New Westminster City Hall, advocating for better renter protections.
These people come in as money and build these big places, and we get kicked out.
Efforts that seemingly paid off as the city unanimously passed a renters protection motion Monday evening.
Tenants are valuable members of our community that we can't afford to lose, just like they can't afford to lose their housing.
There's some areas in the downtown area, particular of New Westminster, where tenants are particularly vulnerable, and we want to get ahead of that.
The motion was put forward by City Councillor Nadine Nakagawa in response to recently passed provincial legislation that's aimed at spurring housing development around major transit hubs.
There's these rings of density that the province has mandated around the transit centres, which sounds really good in theory, but some of the unintended consequences of that is that affordable rental in that area might be torn down to create new, newer buildings that are far more expensive.
Those higher density rings amount to about an 800-meter wide circle around the city's Columbia and New Westminster SkyTrain stations. Local tenant union volunteer Dustin Godfrey lives in that ring.
I'm paying about $1,400 a month, and I'm looking at probably, if I were to move into the average unit in New Westminster, I'd be looking at around a 50% rent hike.
Godfrey is among local advocates applauding the city's move. The protections are expected to be modeled after bylaws in Burnaby, where developers must rehouse any tenants they displace and cover potential rent increases for up to 3 years. Tenants then have the right to move into the new building at their old rental rate.
Because it's a newer build, it's actually an improvement for some tenants, right?
New Westminster staff are now working to develop the city's official policies, while these advocates call on other municipalities to follow suit. John Hernandez, CBC News, New Westminster.
To the Okanagan now, where the BC Conservation Service is urging people to be careful around deer especially does with newborn fawns. The warning comes after a woman in West Kelowna was attacked while walking her dogs yesterday evening. She was treated in the hospital for non-life-threatening injuries, but one of her chihuahuas was trampled and wound up dying. People who live in the neighborhood say there have been several sightings of the deer in recent weeks.
And I think there's way too many deers here. And if you have a little dog, I can see the problem, yeah.
The Conservation Service has determined the deer was protecting its fawn when it attacked. The agency has since posted warning signs in the area, asking the public to take precautions, including leashing pets, traveling in groups, and keeping distance from wildlife. A rather famous white grizzly bear has died after being hit by a car near Yoho National Park, close to Field, BC. Bear 178, or Nakota, was struck along the Trans-Canada and found dead on Saturday. Parks Canada says it happened just 12 hours after the bear's 2 cubs were also hit and killed on the same highway. Staff were repairing wildlife fencing along the route and tried to encourage Nakota to get off the road. She was then reportedly startled by a train and ran into traffic. Nakota's frequent roadside visits made her very popular online, but park officials said she became just too comfortable around people, so they put in a no stopping zone where she and her cubs were spotted. A federal judge has ruled Canada's environment minister broke the law when he waited 8 months to recommend an emergency order to protect BC's endangered spotted owls. Court records show Minister Stephen Guilbeault determined the species faced imminent threats if logging continued in its habitat.
I would think that from now on, the minister and subsequent ministers will follow the law. And when they make an emergency finding, they will quickly go to cabinet to essentially sound the alarm.
The judge said the delay was unreasonable and unlawful under the Species at Risk Act. It's believed there's only one wild-born spotted owl left in the country, and it happens to live in southwest BC. Now, if Ottawa does decide to appeal that court decision, it has about a month left to do so. Canada's immigration minister is biting back at BC's premier after David Eby criticized Ottawa for giving Quebec money to help grapple with a surge in asylum seekers. Minister Mark Miller says if BC wants more cash for newcomers, it should accept more refugees.
I think perhaps there was some confusion on the Premier's behalf as to what this money was for. The suggestion was it was for temporary residents. That is absolutely not the case. It's to compensate Quebec for 2 fiscal years of costs they've incurred with respect to the disproportionate flow of asylum seekers. So, we need provinces like British Columbia to step up when it comes to actually apportioning asylum seekers. It doesn't.
Miller's comments came a day after David Eby slammed the feds for, as he put it, showering cash and resources on eastern provinces at the expense of western provinces. The Premier has called on Ottawa to tie housing funding to immigration so that BC can keep up with its rapidly growing population. A day after it threatened more job action, the Union for Canada's Border Guard says it has reached a tentative agreement with the federal government. More than 9,000 employees with the Canada Border Services Agency were planning to strike as of Friday, but negotiators today managed to reach a deal. Now, details are still under wraps, but the Treasury Board says it includes better wages and benefits. Workers have been without a contract for 2 years and wanted pay parity with other law enforcement agencies. It has a 19th century look to it. It's featured on a Nickelback album, and it's forever surrounded by tourists. The Gastown steam clock is a staple for Vancouver visitors, so we headed down to find out what exactly draws the crowds to it. Check it out.
What made you come to the Gastown steam clock this afternoon?
Well, I've heard all about it, and I wanted to see for myself, so we decided we'd do a bike ride, and we decided to walk down here and take a look at it, and it is wonderful. It is so cool.
What if I told you that the steam clock is not actually fueled by steam?
It's a little unfortunate, but it's something worth looking at.
I'm sorry to have dampened your time.
I'm off. I'm leaving before it goes off now. I mean, what's the point?
We ought to bring it to the Philippines. No, just kidding, just kidding.
Just kidding.
No, we just love to see nice structures. It's an historic landmark.
How was that for you?
That was pretty cool. Yeah, that was good.
The Westminster chimes, beautiful.
Yeah, it struggled a little bit, I think, but I got it.
Would you recommend it to people?
I mean, it's a clock. I mean, sure. I mean, I think if you're in Gastown, it's a place to go and take a picture, and Gastown's really nice.
Ricardo, let me ask you a question. When do you think the steam clock was made?
I think in the century 18.
Let me tell you something. It was built in 1977.
Oh my God.
Still ahead, one of Canada's most prominent museums is reopening after 18 months of renovations. We'll get a sneak peek after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. It has been a year and a half since UBC's Museum of Anthropology closed its doors for seismic upgrades. But on Thursday, it'll once again open to the public. Our Caroline Chan got a sneak peek at some of the changes and their plans for the big reopening.
What I love about this time is that I walk through here regularly and I see change.
Hi, I'm Caroline.
Hi, Caroline. I'm Sue Rowley, and I'm the director here at the Museum of Anthropology. Welcome here today. We're so pleased that you could be with us.
I'm very excited to be here. It's a very exciting time for the museum. Can you tell us about it?
Well, we're absolutely thrilled because finally, after 18 months of closure, we're going to be able to open the doors to the public again and welcome back our visitors. And then we have two major exhibits that are opening. We have To Be Seen, To Be Heard, First Nations in Public Spaces 1900 to 1965. And that's really looking at First Nations of British Columbia and the ways that during a period of intense assimilation policies and dispossession, First Nations peoples chose to represent themselves in public spaces as living, self-determined, Indigenous, and modern. And then the other exhibit that we have opening is Lisa Rehana, who's a Maori artist, her incredible work In Pursuit of Venus Infected. And that is an audio and visual sound presentation. A section of the building was found to be insecure in an earthquake, in the potential of an earthquake, and that is the iconic Great Hall of the museum designed by Arthur Erickson. And so the decision was made to rebuild that. They had to take it down below ground, build it up from first principles, and put in base isolation, which are actually, they're like these giant tubs of lead shot that the building sits on. And in the event of an earthquake, the entire building will absorb the shock and move. It's incredible, right? I mean, it's just been such a journey, but having it there is, when we think about that ability to protect and to care, when you think about one of the things, when you think about museums, you think about people's connections, relationships, but you also think about the duty of care.
And Canada's banking sector is facing another shakeup. The National Bank of Canada is set to acquire Canadian Western Bank. The all-share deal has been valued at around $5 billion. It'll see the Quebec-focused National Bank expand to the west of the country, taking over Canadian Western's 39 branches and around 65,000 clients. And here is a shot of White Rock at the pier earlier this evening. Nice to see the sun setting there. And we'll have a few more days of sun before the rain returns. We'll time it out with your 5-day forecast next.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond. Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
Welcome back. BC's latest snow survey shows our province's snowpack is well below normal. As of June 1st, it's averaging 50% of what it usually is. The good news, provincial experts say the snowmelt-related flood hazard remains low. And despite significant heat last month, there was no significant flooding in BC. However, the low snowpack, early snowmelt, and ongoing dry conditions are all creating significantly elevated drought hazards for the summer ahead.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
In time for a look at the weather, let's bring in our Darius Medalvian. Darius, sounds like a little bit of an improvement in the forecast.
That's right, Tanya. There is a little bit of improvement, but I'd say, measured positivity in terms of what we're looking at here, because we did still have an extremely low total snowpack this summer. So this winter. So even though it has been melting at a fairly normal rate as we've headed into the spring, as you can see, we've reached a sort of more average, even though still well below average, a number of stations that are experiencing, normal amounts of snowpack. We still do have an extraordinary number that are seeing record low levels, just because we never reached a high enough point. But we should compare this to last year, because I think that'll paint a good picture of where we're at. Last year, we had almost all stations at record low levels of snowpack, because we had that extremely hot May heat wave in May 2023, and that really just decimated the snowpack really quickly. So that's why we didn't really have any snowpack going into the summer, whereas this year we will still have some, and that should give us more consistent water inputs. That should help a bit with the drought situation and so the fire situation. So slightly better position for now than we were last year, but again, we haven't had those water inputs as we've headed into this time, because we haven't had that buildup of snowpack that really would have let us continue adding water to the system as we've gotten this far into the season. So rain on the way is good news, and luckily we've got some of that more coming this weekend. A little bit of that rain that we had come today, still passing through parts of the province tomorrow, but generally Friday into the weekend is going to be our next big system passing through that should give us some significant rainfall, so a little bit of good news there. In terms of the winds, I know many people, especially in the interior, southern interior parts of the coast, have logged how windy it has been recently, which is really the case across BC. I think we can talk a little bit about the explanation for that later this week, but for now, just be aware that it will get windy again next Friday, but the winds that we saw today are probably a little bit more out of the ordinary. Temperatures today were fairly seasonal, maybe a couple degrees below in some parts of the province, a couple degrees below here on the coast. But conditions tomorrow are looking a lot drier for most places, a little bit more sunshine coming out. Thursday looking especially sunny across BC, including here in Vancouver. But then again, that rain does return for most of the province as we get into the weekend.
All right, thank you so much, Darius. And that is your late news for this Tuesday, June 11th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. And you can always find us online. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for being with us. Good night.